Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Michael and Patty Show. I'm Michael.
And I'm Patty.
And we're just going to get started and get right into it. The one thing that's kind of funny about this podcast is when we started 110 episodes ago, I felt like just like a YouTube channel or anything else that we run out of content. And as you said earlier this week, this business is just absolutely crazy. And if anything, we always seem to have 150, 160 things in the queue to talk about. And even when we're producing our list of stuff to talk about, which doesn't actually have the content, it just has point forms, there's always something we're adding just prior to recording the episode. Don't you find that?
Yeah, or just there may have been a new situation that arose, which, well, we also have to include this, or I actually just experienced that, and our intention was in one direction, and then we end up going in a different direction with it. So always changing.
So I had a agent show probably one of the nicest, prettiest, well-built, ideal location waterfront homes on the entire island, Patty.
Really?
And actually, I had it pre-inspected, which is what I do for most of my sellers, is I actually order a home inspection. That way it's done, sort of like the 101-point inspection when you buy a car. This way they don't have to spend the $500 to $800 or whatever it is for a home inspection. And it's packaged a lot nicer along with those really nice professional photos from the best photographer, the video from the best videographer. So it's a nice, clean package ready to close on.
Yeah, and it also helps sellers, because I know it's something that I also do at my office, is it hopefully helps them have less sleepless nights. When they're going through the process, they're all excited, anticipating an agreement of purchase and sale to come in, and then that dreaded home inspection clause. So by pre-inspecting the home, hopefully it reduces some of the stress and the anxiety for the seller, and they feel more confident.
So in this particular purchaser's case, he's a Canadian. And I find one thing with Canadians versus the rest of the world is they get caught up in analysis paralysis. Do you find that?
Yeah, we do.
And just like an American friend of mine said, if you ask enough questions about anything, you're going to talk your way out of it. And that's what happened with this particular case here. And the questions were, let's say, interesting. So this particular house has a really high-end roofing system. I believe it's made out of rubber or some sort of composite. It's very rare. I've seen it on multi-million-dollar homes. It's very expensive, durable, lasts a million years. It's great stuff. But in the home inspection, it showed rust on one of the corners of one of the shingles or sheets of shingles, because they usually come in sheets in this case. And that raised massive alarms for the purchaser, thinking there's some grand conspiracy going on with the roofing system. As it turns out, there used to be an electrical conduit beside this particular area of the roof, and there was nuts and bolts rusting, which leaked rust onto the roof, which the home inspector picked up and turned it into something that this purchaser was looking at as catastrophic. So immediately the glass is half empty and not half full, and he thinks now the whole roof may need replacement because of this little leaky bolt rust on the roof. So, of course, he asks about the roof. We say the roof has been discontinued. So, again, the glass is half full again. Must be something wrong with the roof. They've discontinued it. As it turns out, I researched the roofing system. They discontinued it because it was too expensive. Unlike an asphalt roof, which they're guaranteed to have business 15 at max 20 years down the road and replace it, plus shingles are blowing off every time you have a hurricane. This roof is good practically forever. So they discontinued it because it didn't have built-in obsolescence, and people weren't buying it because it was too pricey. But the purchaser thought this was a big conspiracy, and the home seller is moving out of the house because of this rust on the corner of one little roofing tile.
That's unfortunate. Sometimes you do find that home inspectors, you have a well-trained home inspector. They should stay in their lane, first of all. If they are a professional roofer who got into doing home inspections, then maybe perhaps they could voice a little bit more of an opinion. But the home inspectors that I use typically say, you may want to have this looked at by a roofing company. I'm just red flagging it or bringing your attention to it, but they should never give diagnoses and it's all in the delivery of the message too, don't you find, Michael? When home inspectors make things feel or sound catastrophic, you're just doing a disservice to that buyer as well because they could be missing out on such an amazing, great property. And in this case, it sounds like a high-end property with a very expensive roof. They didn't cut any corners on price.
It's a beautiful property with amazing panoramic views and the ability to install kayaks, canoe, cross-country ski. There's walking trails and an in-ground heated pool, as well as a pool house and a jacuzzi tub.
Well,
I could see you in this house.
What a lucky buyer to have the opportunity to even be able to purchase this property. So you have to tell us, did it go through?
Well, as I said from the beginning, this particular purchaser sees everything as the glass is half full.
Half empty. Would you not say?
Half full. Half empty?
Yeah, I would say half empty.
But wait, there's more to the story. So this house is over $1 million. It's $1 million and a bit. And he also wanted to know, has the generator been tested?
Okay.
Is that a reasonable question? Is the home inspector going to test the generator? Is the home inspector a small engine mechanic?
No, I know.
So typically these generators, if you don't know, they are referred to as standby generators. So they are typically permanently installed on a cement pad, permanently wired into the house. They'll run the entire house. They're typically fueled by, for the most part, propane, sometimes diesel. Diesel fuel has issues sitting for a long time, so it may not be advisable. They will come on once a week and self-test for the most part. But this particular purchaser, I don't know what he wanted, if he wanted us to pull out the spark plugs and check for compression, or if it's I don't know. I don't know what he wanted. Ask enough questions, you're going to find enough problems. And no, the home inspector is not going to do a bunch of testing on the generator. If you wanted that done, I suppose you could call someone like
an electrician.
Chandler. No, you want a small engine. Of course, you could call an electrician. Call an electrician, a plumber, a small engine expert. Get them all there checking out this generator that seems to be such a concern on this $1 million plus house. It seems a little ridiculous.
It does.
There's no such thing as a stupid question, but this definitely fits into the maybe category.
Well, they're allowed to do their due diligence. It's just, again, as realtors, we are to stay in our lane. We are not home inspectors. As home inspectors, they stay in their lane. They're not necessarily, unless they have their red seal, they've got their certification, an electrician or a plumber or something like that. So as long as that's why it takes a team to be able to represent a buyer and a seller to help facilitate the sale of your property or the purchase of a property, because they should have, if you have a really good team around you, protect you, but no one's making statements or assumptions without the accreditation behind them to make those statements.
So in this case, what could the purchaser have done rather than jumping to conclusions about problems with the generator and problems with the roof? They probably could have called the manufacturer and asked them directly, why did you discontinue this roofing?
Yeah, 100%.
The other thing is and the other thing about the roof is there is never anything used in the installation of the roof that would exhibit rust because all the fasteners, I believe, are aluminum.
Ah, okay.
Or they were something that didn't rust, whether they're aluminum or some other metal, I don't know. As far as the generator, yeah, you can get a generator tech to check it out. And moving along, Patty's giving me the wavy sign. Just like starting a new business, people usually give up before they reach success. This is particularly true when selling PEI real estate. Patty, maybe you can elaborate.
Well, it's no different, like you had said. Starting a new business, it typically takes 5 to 7 years to really find that, hopefully, level of success. It pairs and it runs parallel to selling your home. Whatever the days on market are to try to facilitate a sale, again, these are properties that are priced right. You have to be able to respect and appreciate if the market says 120 days and you want to sell your property in 60 days, well, there's one part of that equation that you're going to have to be very mindful of, and that's going to be the price. You're going to have to aggressively price it in order to meet that that goal that you have in generating a sale on your property. Again, however many days for a successful business, it takes 5 to 7 years. I know when I was in my early years of real estate, it was not easy. And I'm sure maybe it was super easy for you, Michael.
Super easy.
Oh, yes. But it wasn't easy.
Open the door and clients were lined up down the street.
Well, I was new to Prince Edward Island, so I didn't have a sphere of influence or a group of family or friends or anyone to perhaps be little cheerleaders of me. So I was starting from scratch. Not leached, but be able to advocate on my behalf and spread my name out there. So instead, you have to, and I did this full time, worked my butt off, probably 60 to 80 hours a week. I was very committed to my end goal, which was hopefully one day to be a successful realtor. Well, I was about to give up just before, it was around year 5.5, I was about to give up in real estate and thought I needed to look for a job. I felt Powerhouse Patty was just a big fake and a fraud. I wasn't able to make this work. This business is really, really difficult. And if I stopped, which would have been around midsummer 2015, the switch was about to flip. And as soon as that switch flipped, there was another business, call an opportunity. There was another seller, another buyer, and all of a sudden everything just fell into place for me. No difference than a seller. If you pull your listing just before the winter, there could be just that buyer around the corner who ends up reaching out to their agent and saying, hey, is this property still for sale? I've been keeping an eye on it all summer and I'm finally in a position already. No, they pulled the listing off. Let me see if I can reach out to the listing agent and see if it's an option. No, they're just going to bring it on in the spring. And that's usually the black and white answer that a listing agent will say because they're no longer under contract with that seller. And then the buyer has to find something else. And you just missed out on the opportunity. You gotta stick at it. If you're wanting to sell your property, sell your property. You want to succeed in business, you got to put in the time. It will happen.
If you're selling your property, you need to be aware of market conditions and absorption rates. And that's what Patty's referring to as far as days on market and prices, because changing the price may change the absorption rate. In other words, how many transactions happen within that price range and how much inventory there is. I had a seller that had a piece of land for sale with some agents on the island, and she was completely dismayed and pissed off with them because the property didn't sell, and it was already listed for, I think, 120 days, if that. And she referred to, well, in BC and Alberta, and I had a house in Guatemala, and it sold in 2 weeks. And I said to her, this isn't those markets. And I said, you bought a property, because she had bought it just a few years ago. And I said, you know how long that property was on the market when you bought it? And of course, she said no, because the agents didn't tell her this when she bought it. I said, that property was on the market for 5 years. Yet you're expecting your agents, and the funny part is they went out of their way to take a bunch of really crappy vertical iPhone pictures. And by the way, those aren't syndicated to many web services. If they're vertical, they need to be horizontal. That's like Real Estate 101. They tell you that when you're posting your pictures. So she had all these crappy pictures done with an iPhone. Plus, she was expecting it to sell in 90 or 100 days. And to top it all off, it was listed for double what she paid for it just 3 or 4 years before. Not a very realistic expectation. And that's where the agents should have said, here's the absorption rates for these types of properties. Here's what the market is saying your property's worth. But I mean, if every property doubled in value every 3 years, everyone would be buying PEI properties. So just be aware of market value, absorption rates, and just because you think the property should sell in 90 days because your house in Victoria, BC did that is not realistic, particularly with raw land that's rural.
And the other thing I was going to point out, because it was something that you used to laugh at me about many years ago, Michael, I bought a house back in 2011, I believe. And I was a realtor. I was in the business for a year. I didn't have anywhere near, well, there wasn't much training. It was minimal training. I was trying to navigate my way through this crazy business that I had opted to get into. And I ended up buying a house in Summerside that had been on for 3 to 5 years?
Longer than that. You bought like the biggest lemon in the whole city. They couldn't give that house away. And it was in a neighborhood that was known for really badly constructed homes because everybody with a tool belt and a newly acquired carpenter's hammer was building houses with wet basements, and your house that you bought didn't even have a garage.
Yeah, and I remember after I bought it, you just said, "Did you do your research?" And being all stiff and polished and serious, and you're a little intimidating at that time, Michael. And I remember doing my due diligence. What do you mean? Like, I never said that to you, of course, because I didn't want to come off as an idiot. But my point in bringing this up is I had very little experience. I was able to say I'm a realtor because I was, licensed. I was a member of the Canadian Real Estate Association, but I didn't have the experience in the transactions behind me, which are the 10,000 hours and 1,000 transactions. As a realtor, I made a bad decision. I didn't look back at the history. I didn't sit there because I did probably overpay for this particular property, and I didn't realize the whole story behind it. So my point in bringing that up is even as a licensed realtor, you want to make sure that this person knows what they're doing because apparently I didn't know what I was doing.
But it's not your job to know what you're doing. It's the agent's job to help you maneuver your way through this above and beyond seeing the $ commission check. So why didn't your agent tell you this house has been on for 7 to 10 years and it's a giant lemon?
Because I was brand new in the business and I was my own agent.
Well, you know what they say about those who represent themselves have a fool for a client.
Yeah, but again, that's my point, is if you hire somebody who doesn't have the training or know what research to do on your behalf, if you're a buyer listening to this episode, I, as a realtor, made a mistake myself. So it's really, really important. And I mean, I would be, if I was brand new or I was a buyer or seller, I'd be listening to all of these episodes, Michael, and taking notes as to what I should be aware of, or just make sure that I hire somebody to represent me and I know what questions to look for. I know what to ask of them to make sure that I'm protected.
You had a scenario where you're helping an out-of-province purchaser purchase her first home, and the agent said that in order to compensate for particular future expenses, that the vendor could give her a kickback. Well, they didn't call it a kickback. They said they would give her, what was it, $5,000 or $6,000 or something on closing?
Yeah, cash back.
Explain to me like I'm a brand new agent that just got my license yesterday and bought a house that was on the market for 10 years for too much. How is it that I can receive a kickback legally, and do I not have a requirement to share this with my lawyer and particularly the mortgage company that is buying the house?
Absolutely. And that's what I couldn't...
And what I mean by buying the house is that's first-time home buyers coming in between 1% and 5% of the purchase price. So in essence, the bank is buying the house. And they're going to sort of wonder why, if this person's putting down, say, $4,000, why they're getting the kickback for $7,000.
100%. And why are they financing the full amount? So for using round numbers, $100,000, and let's say at closing, the seller agrees to pay back $5,000 for just to cover costs. Now, there's one thing, and not to confuse our listeners, Michael, sometimes as a result of a home inspection, you will see an amendment completed saying that seller agrees to pay X amount of dollars, at closing to the purchaser to cover costs because the roof needs to be done.
But they don't usually do that. They usually just amend the price.
And that's the route that I typically would prefer to take.
The banks don't want to see a kickback.
No, they don't. This case was to cover future pad fees, the lease fees of the land, so that it would offset, and it was meant to be something attractive to a buyer to, wow, these pad fees are really high. Oh, well, the seller's going to cover a portion of them for the next couple of years. So then it felt a little easier, and it was their way of trying to make this seem attractive. And it was part of an agreement of purchase and sale that this money was going to go back. My question is, how is that money being articulated or conveyed that it's being handed back? Is it just a check that the seller writes back at closing, or do they not pay the full amount and the buyer only owes X amount of dollars and they're to be able to know to put this money aside, which is not going to happen. We know it doesn't happen. The bank, though, is not going to want to pay $100,000 if in all seriousness, the buyer's only paying $95,000 for the house or $90,000.
Well, the biggest thing is the purchaser's not putting really anything down, because they might be putting $5,000 down, but then they're getting, say, $7,000 back. So they're actually up $2,000. They got nothing to lose by walking away other than their credit report.
Yeah, banks don't typically like that. Again, there are situations where you can get cash back, but I just didn't like any of this. And I had asked this first-time home buyer, can you give me a little bit more? I just would be concerned as a first-time home buyer that the bank may not like the way that agreement of purchase sale. This was in a different province too, so it wasn't anything that we were managing.
It's not something you should be doing at any
I agree.
market, because the way it used to work, originally they used to just put it in the offer. Here's a kickback for $5,000. No one cared. Mortgage repayments were like 0.0001% that failed. They're as good as gold. Banks didn't care. And then the banks started to care when interest rates went higher. And then what people were doing is they're putting together an amendment that would say kickback, can legally word it any way you want, but it's a kickback payable to the purchaser at closing, but then they wouldn't share that with the mortgage companies. So in essence, the lawyer and the agents and the purchaser were kind of co-conspiring to hide facts from the mortgage holder. So the mortgage holders got onto this and they said, we don't want to see this anymore. If there's any little side deals you guys are doing in the form of amendments, we want to be privy to that. And nowadays, you don't really see that happening at all. And that's why it's done in the form of a price reduction, which is what your purchaser should have done.
That's what this particular purchaser, my instructions, because they had their own representation, was to just stop. Don't play the game. In all fairness, this is actually what you're offering. So then offer that amount. Don't play the games that they're going to get kickbacks. You're going to complicate your financing.
A purchaser comes along. They're looking at a property, Patty. They live in BC, where houses apparently sell in 3 days. And they say, I want to put in a lowball offer on this property. They don't put it that way, but they say they want to come in lower than asking price. So they use the fact that this property's been on for 137 days. What do you say? In 2 words or less.
No way. No, they don't.
So what?
Yeah, and that's the point. Just because a property, first of all, did that buyer know what the average days on market was? Do they know what the seller's motivation is? And Michael, it's not so black and white that they say they want to put in a lowball offer, or as soon as they say, and again, a seasoned agent, we will call them, will know what's going on, because I just had this week. What are the days on market? Oh, well, the days on market are X. Okay. Wow. So it's been on for a little bit. We're definitely interested in the property. Can you give me the heating costs? Okay, here's the expenses and that. I know what they're doing is trying to prepare to come in with a justified low price. And back in the day when I first got into real estate, I used to tell buyers that were looking to relocate to PEI, Islanders are patient people. This is their number. If a seller's not motivated, and you can sit there and put in a lowball offer all you want, the seller's motivation is price, they're going to sit and wait. If the seller's motivation is time, well, you might be able to do some negotiations. But the days on market, if that's the first listing and you're going to use that as bait, or if you're a seller and you're feeling like, well, my property's been already on for 137 days, using your example, maybe I should rest it and we bring it back on in the spring, you're doing yourself a disservice. So if you like a property, I
Getting back to so what?
okay, go so
The
what?
point was, if you're looking at a house for $300,000 in Charlottetown or Summerside, and the average days on market for a house that's priced at market value, negating all the other circumstances you brought up, is 120 days, and it's been on the market for 60, and the purchaser thinks that's ridiculous based on their lifestyle or their market in BC, so what? They need to know that this house hasn't even been on the market for hypothetically half the time that it typically takes to sell a house in today's market in this location. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Moving along. This is interesting. I tripped across this the other day because do you ever get people that will call you up and say, can you put a value on this house and what it sold for, what the market was like, a CMA from 15 years ago?
Oh, I've had those.
And why does that happen?
Well, because of capital gains, if somebody has passed or they're going to be inheriting a property, or there was a separation and divorce and a whole bunch of situations. Not easy to do.
So what this situation is this gentleman is in the process of potentially inheriting a house. And what I did, and we're not accountants, check with your CPA, you go to sell that house, say, 10 years from that date that you inherit it. Revenue Canada looks at the value of that house when you inherited it. They look at the value when you sold it, and you pay capital gains on the difference. The biggest challenge is people that inherit houses don't do what I would do, which is I would go out and get 3 appraisals, and the instructions to the appraisers would be, I want the highest value possible, and then I would pick the highest value. I'd use that for my base cost moving forward if I ever decided to sell that house.
Yeah, and the smart advice that you've just given there is don't wait 10 years. When you inherit a property, do your appraisal at that time. It will be far easier
and cheaper
and far more accurate than trying to go back and look at historical data, because you're going to need to do this. Now, Michael, we discussed this during the week. Was there any difference if it became your primary residence?
Talk to your accountant.
Okay. Yeah, there's some rules around that.
I didn't even get into that. Talk to your accountant, but I think it would be advantageous if you were to inherit a property to have 3 appraisals done and pick the highest value because that's what you want. And it's legitimate, in my opinion, because appraisers are always going to have some latitude to go one way or the other. But in this particular case, you want them to justify legitimately and legally the highest value for that property. And it's a lot easier to do today than trying to find historical data from 15, 20 years ago, if it even exists, to put another value on it.
Yeah, and to make sure that when you do get that appraisal, don't just leave it in your emails. Like, have some sort of cloud filing system or some sort of system in place where you're not looking for this piece of paper that you may have mislocated. Like, make sure you have your documentation all in some cloud or some acceptable form so that you don't lose it.
We're going to cover a few quickie topics here.
Okay.
We're going to cover the most ridiculous statement I've heard in months, maybe even potentially years. As we've said in past episodes, when you're hiring an agent or any professional for that matter, lawyer, accountant, plumber, electrician, painter, I would like to look for somebody with 10,000 hours experience, which is 5 years full-time, 40 hours a week. And I'd also like to find someone that's done 1,000 transactions, painted 1,000 houses. In this case, the other day I was talking to a dental hygienist. I said, worked on 1,000 mouths. I don't want to be the first one that she performs dental hygiene on. Are you? Cleaning?
No.
Whatever?
No.
In case an instrument slips and goes through the side of my mouth.
No,
Were you all over the place?
you would not want to be the first,
So just like
typically.
I told this seller with the land, I said, you didn't hire an expert. You hired someone that didn't have the experience that thought they were a professional photographer with their iPhone at a 90-degree angle. It is important to hire an expert. So in this particular case, this is the statement the agent makes. She says to this same land seller, there are 15 buyers for every MLS listing.
No, opposite. 15.
There's 15 listings
Yes.
for every buyer of PEI real estate. In other words, what she was trying to insinuate is we've got so much inventory. We've got 15 listings for every one person that comes along looking for property. And of course, I said to her, we need to just interrupt this conversation for the bullshit alert. Because I'd love to know how this statistic was created and what data set was used. Did this agent interview every single person on earth and ask them if they're looking for real estate right now and there's 15 listings that they had to choose from?
Yeah, like where did this data source, cite your sources, where did she get this from?
I have no idea. That was part of my entertainment this week. And then the other entertainment came from you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Patty was a big believer in steel roofs until such time as she actually employed one to cover her roof. Home inspector makes a statement. The statement is, Patty, you need to get up on that roof each and every year with your little wrenchy thing and tighten those bolts and screws down because they're going to come loose and the panels are going to fly off. You're going to hit your neighbor in the head.
I was told I needed to tighten all the bolts.
Well, I did some research because being a fact-based person, I came up with this, and maybe you can share this actual evidence with our audience of 4 people.
The short answer for this is no. You shouldn't have to tighten the screws every year on a metal roof.
But what if you don't like your husband? You send them out there when it's raining.
Well, it says that's not very nice, and you need to just find a different route to replace the husband and not take those kinds of measures. Because if something happens, your property, and they do pass away, your house is stigmatized, and you won't be able to sell it anyway.
Not to mention, it could fall on the Weber barbecue, and you'd have to go out and buy a new one.
It depends on the type of metal roof that you have. It just says if it's screwed down, exposed fasteners, metal roof, there are only ones that you can actually see the screws with rubber washers, but you don't tighten them annually. That would be overkill and honestly a great way to strip threads or crush washers.
Well, that's what I thought. I thought if you're up there every year tightening the screws down, which usually are going through the asphalt roof, which they never bothered removing, into a piece of plywood or chipboard or MDF, it doesn't take much to ruin those threads, right?
Yes.
Not the threads, but strip the holes they're in. So now you have absolutely no fastening.
Well, and that's what it says. It just says that you do inspect them every 5 to 7 years as a rule of thumb for steel roofs. The washers can age and dry out, crack, or compress. And some screws can back out a bit due to natural expansion, contraction of the metal. So when screws start lifting or washers look cooked, you replace, not tighten. So think of it like checking the oil in your car, occasional, not obsessive. So that would be the answer. I'm a little surprised. It goes on and says if it's a standing seam, hidden fastener metal roof, lucky you. 0 tightening required. So that's always a good thing. The clips allow the metal to expand naturally and nothing is exposed, so nothing to fiddle with. So something to take note of when you are looking at houses or looking to put in a roof.
I'm having a home renovation done, maybe a home inspection, or I'm having a house built. What's the best advice you can give our audience of 3.5 people?
1 point of communication.
1 point of contact?
Yes.
That's when you get into a situation where renovations are being done or a house is being built and you got workers there and they're taking orders from the husband and the wife and the wife's talking to one person, the husband's talking to the other. But the most important thing is, in my opinion, is to be on site. Why is that important?
Oh, well,
Other than documenting absolutely everything in paper, which we've covered numerous times, having 1 point of contact, but being on site.
Just to make sure that the work that has been promised or quoted is the actual work that's being done. And there is no miscommunications. There's no two people overseeing a project with one's in and out, the other one couples busy, one's gone all the time, the other one might be working from home or whatever the situation
One's in the hospital
kids.
with a broken leg from trying to fix the roof, tighten the screws in
But
the rain that you asked for.
you want to make sure. And my other recommendation is before you sign off or agree that the work has been completed, that one point of contact should come back and you should be able to rewalk the renovation, the project that you have being completed, and just make sure that everything is as per your contractual agreement. So you don't find out any red flags or concerns later and go, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be done. Well, no, the worker said that this wasn't part of the project, or the other person said not to do it. We're going to worry about that next year, or whatever the situation is. So one point of contact, clear communication, and that one point of contact on both sides. So it's not just the person ordering the work to be completed, but it's the person representing or who has wrote the quote. That rhymes, actually. That's pretty good.
Wrote the quote?
Wrote the quote actually comes back and makes sure that this was completed. So then everybody's happy and, you end up getting some great Google reviews and your reputation out there. This person is great. They've got great communication, customer service, because at the base of it all, what is most important out there? Yes, the work has been done to a professional level or standard, but the great customer service. No one does it better than Disney.
To give you an example of building gone wrong, I don't know if you heard this story, but there is a gentleman in New York City that inherited a pile of money, ended up building a waterfront home in PEI, picked the perfect lot overlooking a cliff and a beautiful white sandy beach for miles, and he said to the builder, "Build this house." So they went ahead, built the house. It turned out just beautiful, but there is one little tiny problem.
What was that?
It was built 90 degrees as to where it should have been, and the pool, which was intended to be on the water, was actually in the side yard because they didn't build the house facing in the direction for which it was intended, which was facing the southern exposure and the beach, so you could see the beach from your pool. So instead, the pool ended up in their side yard. The owner comes up and I don't know what he said, but this is a great example of not being at the project, or at least having a project manager there that's competent to make sure your house isn't facing the wrong way. I think you've seen houses in Charlottetown that were built at 90 degrees as to where they should have been as well.
Yeah, I just wonder, some of those might be older days when they had horses and carriages.
No, I'm talking intentionally. You wanted the garage facing the road, and the builder built it accidentally facing the side yard.
Yeah, there's those. Or there's a house in Charlottetown that the front and the back look exactly the same.
That's just weird.
Yes, it is. It is actually a bizarre house.
Especially when you get trick-or-treaters and don't know what door to go to because they don't know where the front of the house is.
Well, the backyard backs onto a main road, but it's the backyard. So when you drive by this house, you think, is that the front of the house? But then I have, and I've done it a few times, gone to the front, which is a back street, and I've driven by it, and I couldn't believe the backside from the main street looks exactly like actual backside. So
what does this have to do with the topic at hand?
It has everything to do with the topic at hand. Maybe perhaps the builder decided, maybe it was something that the seller or whoever.
So you think they built the house 180 degrees out of phase to where it should have been, and they wanted the front of the house facing the paved road, which they don't have access to.
Which I have never come across a client that has ever said, I want both sides of my house to look exactly the same.
Have you ever had a client that built a round house and told you to put the kitchen table in the corner?
That's pretty funny, Michael. Now, thanks again for listening to another episode of the Michael and Patty Show, otherwise known as MAPS PEI's podcast that helps guide and navigate you through the buying and selling and everything Prince Edward Island. We appreciate each and every one of you, and if you want to look for a place to go, perhaps a community to help you as well while you're doing your due diligence and on your journey. We also have the Michael and Patty Show, or Moving to Prince Edward Island, from the Michael and Patty Show podcast.
Not podcast, Facebook group and LinkedIn group.
Yes, but I believe the Michael and Patty Show podcast is how it ends.
That's in the title, yeah.
In the title, that's what I'm referring to. So this Facebook group has a lot of great information, and LinkedIn. I haven't done a lot of work on the LinkedIn.
You need to start.
I'm a little busy, but it is a community. It will give summaries of what each episode, because I'm working through them all. I think I'm on episode 58 or so within the Facebook group. And it also has Toolbox Tuesdays, and it also has Thoughtful Thursdays. So a great extra resource or a place for you to go just to get some snapshots. Not that we don't want you listening to every single episode, but sometimes you can kind of pick which ones are appropriate for you today.
You remember my very good friend that was in the Facebook group that kept plugging his property?
Yes, I do.
This guy's awesome. I deleted him from the group and removed him.
Because the group is not about solicitation. It is just about it should be a safe place for you to go and to educate and get information and maybe ask a question or two. And there's over 1,000 people in this community now. So there's some great conversations happening. Plus also it is a place that if you do want to hear a topic as well on our podcast here, we'll be able to cover the stories because we do receive some direct messages as a result of this. So if you have questions, you can get them answered a little quicker there instead of waiting for the next episode. Or perhaps there's a community and people that have already gone through what you're going through or wanting to do some research on, and will be able to also weigh in.
What do you call it? Tricks, traps, and tips about PEI real estate.
Tips, tricks, and traps.
Right on. Have a good day. Thanks for listening.
Have a good day.